Spider-Man isn't the only one with insane versions of himself running around the multiverse. Electro, also known by his given name as Maxwell Dillon, is one of the most adept villains when it comes to multiverse travel. In fact, he even gave rise to an entire multi-dimensional team of himself, which went on to fight against the multiverse's web warriors. Now, today, we're going to take a look at 9 of the craziest Electros from around the multiverse and find out what makes them so special. 9. Electro from Earth 8311. Just like Spider-Ham of Larval Earth, which is the home of animal-themed heroes in the Marvel Comics, there are animal versions of our favorite Marvel villains as well. On this particular world, there's even an animal version of Electro. You can probably guess what animal best goes with this villain, the electric eel. First appearing in the Marvel Tales Volume 2, number 236, Electro's debut in 1990 would eventually see him team up with the rest of the animal-themed Sinister Six, like the feline version of Dr. Octopus, Dr. Octopussycat, or the marine mammal version of Sandman, the Sand Manatee, and even a turkey-inspired Green Goblin. 8. Disco Electro of Earth 65. The Maxwell Dillon of Earth 65 shares the same dimension as Spider-Gwen. In this universe, Gwen Stacy, and not the lovable geek Peter Parker, was bitten by a spider and gifted arachnid-like superpowers. The Electro of this universe first appeared in Spider-Gwen number 9 in 2016, and there's a lot to love about this character. Unlike his original Earth 616 counterpart, the Electro of Spider-Gwen's world isn't a maniacal supervillain. He's just a guy who loves the nightlife, loves to party, and has a cool trick. He wears a disco costume filled with lights, and with his natural powers, he can turn the lights on and off and illuminate any room. 7. The year 1602 Electro from Earth 311. Alive during the Elizabethan Age, the Electro of Earth 311 was a supervillain in 1600s England. The Electro of this world was a bit more terrifying than the normal Maxwell Dillon of Earth 616, at least in my honest opinion. Often seen shirtless with a cascade of white lightning arcing all around his body, this version of Electro could easily be mistaken for a take on Thor, if you just strain your eyes just a tiny little bit. His first appearance was in Amazing Spider-Man Volume 4, number 1, and in that issue he served in a historical version of the Sinister Six known as the Sinister Sextet. Led by an even more demonic take on Carnage, the Sinister Sextet had organized in this issue to steal some valuable loot from a local church, and if it weren't for the sudden arrival of the Web Warriors, a team composed of multidimensional Spider-Men, then the Sextet would have made off with their prize. 6. Steampunk Electro from Earth 803. The Steampunk Electro of Earth 803 is definitely one of my favorite takes on the villain. Set in New York City in the year 1895, the entire universe that this version of Maxwell Dillon occupies is obsessed with the growing scientific inventions of American scientists, and electricity itself is one of the most inspiring forces captivating the public at the time. Kind of like nuclear-themed heroes spread in the 1960s and nanotech-inspired heroes took root in the early 2000s, both villains and heroes sprouted from the ranks of inventors in Earth 803. With Maybelle Riley, this universe's steampunk Spider-Woman, or more appropriately known as Lady Spider, as his main adversary, Maxwell Dillon had his work cut out for him. At one point, Steampunk Electro geared up in his long green trench coat and strapped a backpack containing 2 giant electric generators on his back. He interrupted a high society ball, and he wrapped his hands around the mayor of New York. Taking the plump little mayor hostage, the bystanders could do nothing but look on helplessly. Unbeknownst to Electro, Lady Spider was actually in the crowd in her civilian clothes, and when Electro launched an attack that knocked out the lights, she sprung into action. She took on the villain, and eventually, when the entire gang of Steampunk Sinister Six was drawn into action, she managed to fight them all off as well. 5. Electro Prime from Earth 449. Hailing from one of the most tragic multiverse worlds, the Maxwell Dillon of Earth 449 is one of the few witnesses that saw the death of his universe's Spider-Man. Cornered in a fight against Morlun, a type of dimension-hopping vampire that feeds off of totem forces in the Marvel Comics, Electro realized that existence was much bigger than his one world. He wanted to find a way to hop between dimensions, just like Morlun, and eventually he did. Just like Spider-Men and Spider-Women eventually organized as a super team to take on trans-dimensional threats, the Electro of the different worlds, led by this guy, Electro Prime, gathered to commit supercrimes. 4. Forever Yesterday Electro from Earth 9105. First appearing alongside Electro Prime in the events of 2015's Web Warriors, Forever Yesterday Electro's history is cloudy at best. Appearing in the guise as an ancient Egyptian noble with a crew of equally accurately garbed underlings, Electro of Earth 9105 might have very well been recruited from a version of ancient Egypt that was filled with superheroes, like the Steampunk Electro of New York City in 1895 or the Elizabethan Electro of 1602. In the comics, he shows up in his first fight against Spider-Gwen and Mayday Parker when they try to stop him from stealing a pallet of gold. The Electro of Earth 9105 was actually joined by a few other Electros too, some of whom might show up on this list a little bit later, but they were all pretty confused as to why these two spider-themed heroes were kicking their butts. After all, Electro Prime and the rest of the Electroverse villains had thoroughly studied this strand of the multidimensional web, and they found that there were no other Peter Parkers left living. But as they would soon find out, Peter Parker wasn't the only one who possessed spider powers in the multiverse, meaning there was a lot more Spider-Men than just the ones that had the name Peter Parker. 3. The Battery from Earth 1082. The Battery is the name of Electro from Earth 1082, and much like the Electro from the Ultimate Comics, this version of the villain was able to transmute his entire physical form into living energy, becoming a far more powerful version of the villain than any of his body-bound counterparts. Originally a genius inventor, this version of Electro was among the first contacted by Electro Prime, that very same version of the character who witnessed the death of Spider-Man at the hands of Morlun, and began the hunt to assemble variants of himself across the multiverse. Together, the Battery, whose actual name was Maxwell Dillon, developed the technology to merge the powers of the different Electros together. He forced a multiverse worth of Otto Octaviuses to work alongside him, and eventually, they created a device that would take the power of other Electros and graft it into him. With Maxwell Dillon as the foundation, one of every 10 Electros in the universe were merged into his body, and he grew more and more powerful, becoming the living lightning bolt known as the Battery. 2. Zombie Electro from Earth 2149. Like all the Marvel heroes and villains, there's a zombie version of Electro, and just like the other zombie Marvel heroes, he likes to eat living flesh. In death, his affiliation with his fellow villains was as strong as ever, as he joined the undead Sinister Six when they tried to trap Wolverine and Magneto, hoping to take a bite of that regenerative flesh that Wolverine was so famous for. Little is known of the life, death, and, I guess, undeath of Zombie Electro from Earth 2149, but it might be safe to assume that he wandered the Earth until his eventual demise, probably during the zombie battle to feast on Galactus. Number 1, the one you guys have been waiting for, Mangaverse Electro from Earth 2301. The Electro of Earth 2301 is a manga version of Maxwell Dillon, inspired by the classic Japanese art style. In this world, Peter Parker is a student of the wise Ben Parker, his uncle, and a powerful martial arts instructor. After Ben's demise, it falls to Peter to lead the Spider Clan, but eventually, when Venom rises as a rival with his own army, Peter is forced to fight. Serving within the Mangaverse Venom's clan, Electro is seen as a masked villain, garbed in a black martial arts robe. His entire face is hidden behind a giant wooden lightning bolt mask held in place by thin yellow bands. Perhaps blind in this universe, or perhaps he simply could sense his surroundings by using electrical currents, we really can't be sure. There's really not much shown of the Electro of the Mangaverse besides his feats in this ambush set by Venom, in which Electro mercilessly shoots a powerful lightning bolt blast into an unexpected Spider Clan ninja. Thanks for tuning in, guys. If you liked this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and perhaps, a little tiny comment on the bottom. I'll catch you guys next time.